Chapter 1. The Birth of Living Steel. To the rest of the world, it is a masterpiece of metallurgy, a curved sliver of steel that represents the pinnacle of ancient engineering. But to the samurai, the katana was never just a weapon. It was his tamashii, his soul. It was a living, breathing extension of his own spirit, a partner that shared his breath, his honor, and eventually his grave. But how does a cold piece of folded metal gain a consciousness? How does a slab of iron become a sentient witness to history? To find the answer, we must strip back the steel and enter the flickering shadows of the forge, where the line between prayer and science disappears. The Shinto foundation. The journey of the blade begins not with fire, but with faith. At the heart of Japanese culture lies Shintoism, the belief in kami. The ancients believed that the divine spark wasn't reserved for gods and men. It lived in the stones, the wind, and the iron sand. Because the katana was destined to hold a soul, the process of its creation was treated as a sacred ritual of divine alchemy. The smithy was not a factory. It was a temple, the purification. Before a master smith even touched his hammer, he had to become a ghost. He entered a state of kesai, total purification. He would stand beneath the thundering ice of a midnight waterfall, washing away the impurities of the world. He fasted for days, abstaining from meat and wine. He donned the white robes of a Shinto priest. The belief was simple and terrifying. Any shadow in the smith's heart, anger, greed, or even a fleeting moment of doubt, would be hammered into the molecular structure of the steel. To forge a pure blade, the man himself had to be hollow, a clean vessel for the divine. The weaving of life. Then the fire is birthed. The smith gathers the tetsu, iron sand, and transforms into the legendary temagane or jewel steel. As the hammering begins, the rhythm becomes a meditation. Every time the smith folds the steel, he is not just removing impurities, he is weaving. With each fold, often repeated over 30,000 times, the grain of the metal becomes as complex as human DNA. The smith's sweat is rhythmic. Hypnotic prayers are hammered into the red-hot core. It is said that in these moments, the master's own life force is bled into the steel, imprinting his personality, his temper, and his very essence into the blade's memory. The moment of awakening. But a finished blade is born blind. It is a sleeping soul, a dormant power waiting for its first breath. The moment of awakening is the yakiire, the hardening. The smith coats the blade in a secret mixture of clay, sand, and charcoal, then brings it to a specific temperature, judged only by the color of the glow in a pitch-black forge. Then the plunge. As the red-hot steel hits the cold water, a violent scream erupts, the cry of the steel. In this instant, the blade curves. It reaches its final form. If the smith's spirit was true, the blade survives the shock and wakes up. If there is a flaw in the man, the steel shatters in the water. The soul is rejected. But once the blade wakes, it begins to develop a hunger. And as we will see, not every soul born in the forge is a benevolent one. Chapter 2. The Blood in the Forge. The imprint of character. If the forging process is a birth, then the master smith is more than craftsman. He is a father. It was a firm belief among the samurai that the personality of the smith was permanently etched into the blade's consciousness. A calm, disciplined smith produced a blade of wisdom. A violent, unstable smith produced a weapon of chaos. Masamune versus Muramasa. Nothing illustrates this more than the legend of the two greatest rivals in Japanese history. Masamune and Muramasa. Masamune was a man of peace, a monk-like figure who sought harmony in his steel. His blades were said to be righteous, refusing to cut what was not necessary. Muramasa, however, was a man of dark genius and a violent, unstable temper. He was brilliant, but his soul was a storm of bloodlust. The test of the stream. Legend tells of a test where a blade from each master was lowered into a running stream filled with drifting leaves. When Muramasa's blade, the Juchi Yasamu, was placed in the water, every leaf that touched its edge was sliced cleanly in two. The blade was a hunger. It sought to destroy everything that crossed its path. But when Masamune's blade, the Hanjo Masamune, was lowered into the same stream, the leaves simply drifted around the edge. The blade refused to cut anything that was innocent. A monk watching the test declared, "The Muramasa is a terrible sword, for it does not discriminate. The Masamune is the sword of a hero, for its soul knows the value of life." The cursed blades. But there's a darker side to the Tamashii. The blades of Muramasa became known as cursed. It was whispered that once a Muramasa was drawn, it refused to return to its scabbard until it had tasted blood. If the wielder did not find an enemy, the blade would compel them to strike a friend, or even themselves. The shogun eventually banned these swords, fearing their dark influence. But for the samurai, this wasn't just superstition. It was a warning. The weapon you carry is an externalized version of your own honor. If your blade is sour, if its soul is neglected or born of hatred, it is no longer a tool you control. It is a predator that controls you. Chapter 3. The Dormant State. The Sleeping Blade. A katana is not a machine. It is a biological entity of steel. And like any living thing, it requires attention to stay awake. When a blade is left unused, neglected in a corner, or treated as a mere decoration, it begins to slip into a dormant state. Its spiritual vitality dims. The edge, though technically sharp, loses its bite. To the samurai, a neglected sword was a tragedy. A trapped spirit falling into a deep, dark coma. The conversation of maintenance. This is why the daily ritual of cleaning was never seen as a chore. It was a conversation. Using a Chico powder and fine oils, the warrior would spend hours meticulously inspecting every millimeter of the grain. As he wiped the steel, he wasn't just removing dust. He was feeding the tamashii. He would observe the hamon, the temper line, searching for changes in the metal's mood. Through this repetitive, meditative touch, the heartbeat of the man and the rhythm of the steel began to synchronize. The sword became familiar with the warmth of his hands, and the man became familiar with the weight of the sword spirit. The danger of the sour soul. But beware the blade that has been mistreated. A sour soul is a katana that has been used for dishonorable acts or abandoned by a coward. These blades become unpredictable. They may slip in the hand at the moment of impact, or refuse to cut when the need is greatest. Some legends even speak of hungry blades that would nick their own owners, drawing blood as a punishment for neglect. To own a katana is to enter a marriage of spirits, and in this union, silence is the deadliest weapon of all. Chapter 4. The Awakening Ritual. The moment of combat. There's a profound difference between a sword being carried and a sword being woken. To the samurai, a blade in its scabbard is in a state of deep meditation. To draw it without the proper ritual is to interrupt a dream. But when the air grows cold and the scent of battle rises, the warrior must perform the awakening. The breathing and the rhythm. It begins with the breath. Standing before the enemy, the samurai enters a state of mushin, no mind. He begins a specific, deep abdominal breathing technique designed to synchronize his own pulse with the rhythm of the steel at his hip. He is searching for a resonance. When the vibration of his own spirit matches the molecular frequency of the tamagane, the two become a single organism. The ki and the shock. Then comes a shock. The transition from stillness to violence is signaled by the ki, the spirit cry. This isn't just a shout to intimidate the foe. It is a sonic vibration meant to startle the tamashii out of its dormant state. At the peak of the cry, the thumb pushes the hilt, a movement called koiguchi no kurikata. As the steel leaves the scabbard, the friction creates a specific high-pitched ring. To a master, this isn't just noise. It is a blade's first breath. The living limb. Practitioners of the old schools claim that a woken blade feels physically different. It loses its static weight and begins to feel like a living limb. It hums with a faint, kinetic energy that guides a warrior's hand. In this state, the samurai no longer swings the sword. The soul of the blade and the soul of the man move as one, a singular flash of silver that exists only in the present moment. Chapter 5: Legacy of the Modern Soul. The science of the spirit. Centuries have passed since the last samurai walked the earth in iron and silk, yet the mystery of the tamashii refuses to fade. Today, we look at these blades through the lens of metallurgical science and psychology. We speak of flow states, that high-performance mental zone where the boundary between self and tool dissolves. Science calls it neurological extension, but the samurais simply called it the truth. Is it possible that the grueling rituals of folding and prayer actually created a molecular structure so perfect, so harmonized, that it interacts with the human nervous system differently than any other object on Earth? Honoring the tradition. For the modern collector, the practitioner, or the seeker of wisdom, the lesson of the tamashii remains actionable. To honor a blade, or any tool of your craft, is to treat it with intentionality. When you respect the object, you cultivate respect for the work. When you maintain your steel, you maintain your discipline. The soul of the blade is, in many ways, a mirror. If you see only a tool, it remains a tool. If you see a partner, it becomes a path to mastery. The final mystery. The katana remains the only weapon in human history that is treated not as a mere instrument of death, but as a sentient partner in life. We may never fully explain why a master's sweat and blood can seemingly fuse consciousness into steel, but perhaps some secrets are better left unproven. As you move through your own battles, remember, the world is full of dormant spirits waiting to be woken. The question is, are you disciplined enough to breathe life into the steel? Outro, the Oracle Scroll. The scroll is closed, but the mystery remains open. Subscribe to the Oracle Scroll to continue unrolling the lost rituals of history. Until next time, keep your blade sharp and your spirit sharper.